Welcome to this Getting Started with SharePoint Framework Extension video series, and this is tutorial 4, Host Your Extension from Office 365 CDN, aka Hello World Part 4. And this is September 2018 edition, so we keep on evolving these videos and written format as we move along and release new versions of SharePoint Framework available for you. Now, in this tutorial, you should follow up on first tutorial parts 1, 2, and 3, where we actually created the application customizer, we added the page placeholders on the customizer, we tested deployment of the customizer to an existing site. Now, in this tutorial, we then actually finalized the deployment. So we'll make sure that the application customizer works even though the local host server isn't running, and we kind of use the Office 365 CDN. Office 365 CDN is a free for any Office 365 subscription, and it improves the performance of your customization, and it also is fully automatic, so you don't actually have to do anything more than package your solution in SharePoint Framework solution in a way that the assets are inside of the solution, and then you deploy those to be available in Office 365, and voila, everything is hosted for you automatically through Office 365 CDN. Obviously, if you want, you can still use an Azure CDN or any other third-party CDN to host your JavaScript and manifest files and all of the other files, but this is by far the easiest and fastest way to get anything deployed and hosted for you in the production usage. Now, let's actually go and have a look on the settings of my tenant or my test tenant, where the Office 365 CDN actually is already enabled. But we're going to have a look on what does it actually mean in practice. So, first of all, you need to have SharePoint Online Management Shell installed to your PowerShell, so your computer. So you're able to then run Connect SPO service. And the URL, in this case, I'm going to use the SPPNP site or tenant, and we're going to connect to the admin site within that tenant. So obviously I need to sign in, so I'm going to then provide the account which has tenant administrative permissions to that particular tenant. So I'm able to control the CDN settings within the tenant. So let's actually sign in using an account and provide a password for that account. So there we go. So now our PowerShell connection towards the tenant is actually working, and we can easily test it out, for example, running an SPO tenant, which will then list the properties of that particular tenant which we're connected. So this confirms that we are actually properly connected on that tenant. Good. So for the Office 365 CDN, we can get the status of the Office 365 CDN by running get SPO tenant CDN enabled, and then we provide a CDN type as the property, because we have two different CDNs available for you for free as part of your Office 365 subscription. One is the public CDN and the second is private CDN. The private CDN is something which improves performance, and it's designed to improve performance mainly, well, initially in the publishing sites, but in the future for other functionalities as well. So it's automatically enabling and improving performance of, for example, publishing pages and all of that in your tenant. The public CDN is initially designed to be, for example, hosting your SPFX solution. So by default, it's hosting stuff. The difference between a public and private CDN is that private CDN is actually permission aware. So none of the assets, none of the content through public CDN can be accessed through anonymous URL. And the URL of a private CDN is changing all the time. Now, public CDN is slightly different. So public CDN actually is anonymously accessible. And what it means is that those folders which you enable for public CDN theoretically can be accessed using an anonymous access. And that might sound really, really scary, but we need to remember that it's only JavaScript files. It's nothing of your content, it's nothing inside of your tenant except JavaScript files and assets which are getting hosted from your tenant. And if that sounds scary, you can always use an alternative CDN option for SharePoint Framework as well. This is just a free for you, no costs involved, and super convenient way of hosting JavaScript files. Now, how do we actually get the current status of things? So we can get SPO tenant CDN Enabled was the first one, but we can also do origins. And we needed to provide the CDN type. So let's actually have a look on the public CDN status. And these are actually the origins which are enabled for my tenant. So let me actually clear this slightly, and let's do this one more time. So I'm going to run the CDN type and public, and we're going to list the origins which have been enabled. So there's 3 different origins by default enabled for public CDN, and these are with a wildcard. So under any single site, these are actually working. So and the key point here to make sure, if you have used the CDN in the past, you need to have a client-side assets capability or the URL enabled, so that your SPFX solutions are automatically hosted from the app catalog site collection. And I'll show this one in practice in the URL levels in a second. But how would I enable this if things are not enabled? You would run set SPO tenant CDN enabled. CDN enabled. And then we say CDN type and public. And that's going to basically then do a confirmation of things that, are you sure you want to do this? And in our case, absolutely we want to do this. And that's going to then enable the CDN in a default origins. And that will be the default set of origins, which you need to have to be able to take advantage of this. Now, whenever you initially enable this, it will actually tell that there is a configuration pending for your asset. So it might be that when you run get SPO tenant CDN origins and CDN type public, you see those entries there, but there's an additional message which is saying configuration pending, and that means that you need to wait for additional max 15 minutes for the CDN to truly be available before you can move forward on the following steps. So please go and have a coffee and do a quick fresh air break, and then you're going to get back on track of actually deploying the solution if you haven't enabled the CDN before this exercise. Now, let's get back on the solution. What are we actually doing? And let's think about what and go through the steps of getting our package truly deployed without the local host being running. So first of all, let's go to our command line. If you're moving from a tutorial tree, this might be still running. So let's actually break that one, so we don't actually have anything running in our command line. And then we go to our Visual Studio solution. And in here, let's actually close the files which we have opened from tutorial 3. And let's start looking what are we actually are packaging here. Now, by default, starting from SharePoint Framework 1.4 version forward, we have this awesome attribute available, which is include client-side assets. And by default, this is true. What it means is that your JavaScript files and other assets are by default included inside of the SPPKG file. So you don't actually have to worry about where they will be hosted. They will be included in SPPKG file, and they will be hosted from your tenant. If your tenant has Office 365 CDN enabled, we're going to use that. If it's not enabled, due to reasons or another, then we kind of serve that content automatically inside of from your application app catalog URL site collection. So we do the flipping automatically. You don't need to worry about the URLs. You don't need to worry about anything else as long as your include client-side assets equals true. Now, if you want to use an external CDN, then you would update this to be false, and then you get the JavaScript files, then you set up your external CDN, you update the URLs and everything else. Now, the second thing which relates on hosting these things is the right manifestation. So if you are using the asset packaging option, you need to make sure that the CDN path is exactly as this one in here. So you don't actually provide any HTTP addresses or any URLs or anything in here. If you do, however, want again use an external CDN, then you update this one, point to the external CDN host URL, or the URL of your files wherever they're actually hosted. So in our case, we want everything to get packaged inside of the SPPKG file, and we want stuff to be served automatically from the Office 365. So we're not going to change anything in here, and the default settings is absolutely fine. Now let's actually move back on the command line. So now we're going to do culp bundle -- ship. So we're actually optimizing the build for production usage. So we're actually getting that everything packaged again. And everything is packaged and optimized through the pipeline. There we go. Now we're ready to go. And then we do call package solution, and that's the ship as well. So let me actually scroll that slightly up so you can more easily see what I'm doing here. Call package solution, that's the ship, and that's going to then package the SPPKG file, which we can start adding again on the tenant. So the previous file version in the tutorial 3 was still pointing to the local host. But now that we did --ship, we actually are telling SharePoint to host everything automatically for us based on the files which are now getting included inside of the SPPKG file. So here we go. Here's a JavaScript file which is getting inside of the solution file, and that's now inside of the SPPKG file. Good. So let's actually update that solution now in our app catalog. So right now, if I do a refresh, we can see that the placeholders are not running, and that's because the local host is not running from the local host. So now if we go to the app catalog, we can see that here we have the solution available. That was the solution which we previously deployed, which was pointing still to the local host. Let's go to the solution folder, updated solution, drag and drop that solution in, update the SPPKG file, replace, and now we get an updated trust dialog, which has a one value changed, and the key value here changed is actually this one. The client-side solution will get content from following domains, and that's now saying SharePoint Online. It no longer says localhost, and it doesn't say a specific URL because we choose to use the automatic hosting as part of our tenant. Again, if CDN is enabled, we're going to use the CDN. If CDN is not enabled, we're going to serve the content directly from the app catalog. And that's pretty cool. So let's actually click now deploy. And since we have the solution still deployed for the same site where we actually added in the tutorial 3, I can now go to the same site and I can actually refresh the manifest files, the JavaScript files, everything is updated. So we actually are serving the content now dynamically from the CDN, which is now getting enabled. And we can easily also confirm this actually by quickly having a look on the URL. So let me actually open up a dev tools. Let me refresh this one. And if I go to the networks, actually sources, we can see all of the sources and what is getting loaded from where. One of the interesting sources here is the public CDN, SharePoint Online. If I extend that one, we can see an interesting URL. Let me actually slightly extend that one. Interesting URL, which is sppmp sharepoint.com/site/apps, client assets, and the manifest ID of the particular component. So we're serving right now in my tenant through Office 365 CDN because that's enabled. Now, if the tenant would not have CDN enabled, we would serve the content directly from that site collection using that URL. So you don't have to do anything other than if the logic is completely automatic. So if somebody goes and disables the CDN, your content will still work, but it's just getting served directly from the app catalog site collection. Hopefully that makes sense. But that's all what we're going to do in this tutorial. So this was the tutorial 4. Right now, just confirming in our command line, we're not hosting the local host. We're not loading anything from localhost. We're getting everything is loaded directly from CDN, and our functionality is deployed to the site, and it's getting served automatically from the site without any problems. And the beauty of this site asset packaging is that this file, the SPPKG file in here, you can actually send this in email, or you can send that to any tenant, and it just works because all of the assets are inside of the SPPKG file. So regardless of the CDN settings or the tenant level settings, the solution will work within your tenant or the other tenants as well, because everything is served automatically based on the solution package. Now, in tutorial 1, we created the application customizer. In tutorial 2, we added the content placeholders. So we added the head, top, and bottom placeholders on the page. In tutorial 3, we made sure that we're actually activating this in the site level. And then in tutorial 4, we configured everything to be hosted, even though the local host isn't actually running. So we're basically ready to go to ship. And this one for our customers. Well, it's actually pretty looking extension, but maybe this isn't something which we should be doing in production, but it shows the scenario, what you can do. And the functionalities, you can then add whatever JavaScript here, you can add functionalities, buttons, activities, panels, whatever is needed for your business logic. So you can definitely take this forward from this step. You can definitely take the things and implementation forward from this moment forward. But thank you for watching this tutorial series, and please keep on watching the videos. There's more guidance available in our YouTube channel. Thank you.